Hey, thanks for coming. Really quick intro. I've been a developer for just over a decade, been working in Go for about 3 years now, and I work at Biba. We're making mobile games that help parents get their kids active on playgrounds. So why GRPC? Why not JSON? I've run into a couple of annoyances and things that just build up over time with using JSON. Stuff like parsing, making sure they're using the right libraries to do all the parsing, making sure that the clients are doing all the parsing properly, and what happens when a client sends something like a string when it should have sent a float or an integer. And what about types? Do you want to be able to do enums? What about handling and making sure that binary formats like file uploads or downloads are being done properly? What about documentation? How do you keep the API documentation up to date with the code and everything that's happening there? And lastly, backwards compatibility. How do you handle what happens when a client sends something that's a valid message, but it was a valid message a month ago and they just haven't updated their version of the library yet? So for the sake of argument, you all agree with me, you're going to give gRPC a shot. So first, what do you get out of this? The two biggest wins, in my opinion, is gRPC is built on top of HTTP2, so you get some really cool stuff there. There's a bunch of other things, but this is a lightning talk, so I'm going to keep going. So, cool, you're on board. How do you get it? Again, I'm going to skip a few things, so we're just going to skip straight to how you define a service and how you define the messages. So here's a simple one route, one message service. First up, we've got a message definition, ping. It's got one field called message, and it's a string. And then we've got a basic service that takes that ping message and also returns a ping message. The cool thing about the gRPC is that the comments that you see in there show up in the auto-generated Go code, so that things like GoDoc and other tools like that will still work properly. So, like I said, one of the cool things that I think about gRPC is you get streaming. So to turn this from a unary, so one request is one response, into a couple of different types of streaming, if you put stream in front of the message that's getting returned, you now have server to client streaming, so file downloads. If you put it in front of the input, you've now got client streaming, so think file uploads. If you put it in front of both, you've got WebSockets, basically. So among the code that gets generated is an interface like this that defines what the server has to have on it. And to fulfill that, you just got to define a type, and what you get when you're handling a request is a context and a pointer to a struct that is the protobuf message that we defined earlier. And all you return is whatever the message type you're supposed to be returning and an optional error. And if you try to return both, the server will just go, oh, there was an error, I'm going to ignore that output. And to set up the server, it's actually fairly straightforward. You just set up a port to listen on, you set up a server, you register the type that you set up, and then you tell it to start, and you're off to the races. So I've run into a few pain points over the years when dealing with JSON, and here's how gRPC has helped me with some of those pain points. So the first one is because you're using auto-generated code, you don't have to worry about parsing the JSON, like the inputs and outputs and all of that stuff. The auto-generated code takes care of that for you. The next one is types. If you've got a client that's JavaScript or Ruby or any of the other non-statically typed languages, you don't have to worry about Go, and maybe the client sent a float when it should have sent something else. And hand-rolled clients kind of just go away because you can just give them the auto-generated code and they're all good to go. Next, with documentation, the protobuf definition file that you create is your documentation. It defines all of your message types and your server so that your code is always up to date because the code is being generated from the documentation. And as a little bonus, if you're using Google Cloud and specifically Google Endpoints, you actually get really nice HTML docs that are similar to the Swagger docs. And for backwards compatibility, you actually get a couple of nice little things because you're using the protobuf definition file. And we're going to take a look at how that works right now. So this is a message type that's very obviously been changed over time. Right now, it's got 3 fields, ID, email, and full name. And it's got a couple of reserved fields. Those reserved fields are fields that have been removed in the past and can't be used anymore. The numbers are how the GRPC, all the auto-generated code stuff, it's how it marshals the struct into a binary message format, and those are field numbers. So one of the other nice things about having all these field numbers and all of this stuff is that if the parser on the client or the server side receives a message that it knows about, but that message has fields that it doesn't know about, everything still just works. Those fields go into, what's it called? I think it's just an unknown fields container, and you can examine those inside of your service if you want to, but you can also just ignore them if you don't care. So you're all thinking, this sounds awesome, I want to use gRPC, but I've got a bunch of clients and other services that I can't just go whole hog and update everything in one day to use gRPC. But there's transcoding. This is a neat feature that's built into gRPC. And by annotating your service with a couple of options, in this case saying, if something comes in on HTTP1 with a JSON request to v1 ping, it's going to take the body of that and transcode it into gRPC for you. And a couple of solutions out there. There's one that you can build into your code with gRPC Gateway. Google endpoints can do it automatically for you, and the its.io proxy will do it as well. And I was going to talk a little bit about what we've gotten from gRPC where I work, but I've got 20 seconds left, so thanks.